Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another month of the Chichester Chats. Get some every time. You know me, Phil, you know Lilith, and hopefully, if you've been listening to these, you know our good friend, Mr. DG Chichester.
Good morning, guys. Good to see you both again.
Good to see you.
Definitely.
We've been chomping at the bit to talk to you about this month's Daredevil 304.
Excellent, excellent. A fun issue.
Oh, yeah.
Unusual.
I saw a few people when I put up on social media we were going to talk about this. Like, man, I love that issue. I love that issue. It's like I swear you don't hear about it a lot, but once you mention it, a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, I remember reading that. That's great."
I was going to ask you, like, when you put the poll out for questions, as you do you get a lot of responses? Do you get a lot of feedback from folks?
Sometimes no. That's why I was surprised. I really didn't get any questions, but it's like a lot of people that
Right.
acted in a positive way. They're like, "Oh yeah, I love that issue." All right, so maybe we should get to the big question. Lilith and I had a theory. How did this issue come about? Did you read an article where was it like a crime statistic in New York City? It's like, so many people in New York City get killed in a typical 34 hours or
That's exactly it. Actually, and I think I mentioned maybe the first time we talked. I worshipped at the altar of a newspaper called New York Newsday, which I don't think exists anymore. Somebody said it does, but I haven't seen it in a long time. And it covered the city, but it covered it by neighborhood as well. So it really got deep on Queens and Brooklyn, as well as Manhattan and sort of worldwide news. And they just seemed to me that had some great writers, and they always had unusual stories about the neighborhoods. And there was one statistic that was put out that was, we've just gone through a 34-hour period where there was not one murder in all of New York City, and that was just wasn't the headline. It wasn't maybe the first story in the paper, but it was certainly an unusual statistic to think, well, how many murders are typically in a 34-hour period? And the fact that we've gone through 34 hours without a single murder was newsworthy, which is kind of scary considering I was living in New York at the time. but it that became sort of I would say maybe the fishing point for a lot of stuff that I had been collecting over time, because I had been collecting all the other little bits, or many of the other little bits that sort of make up the story. And maybe we should frame that in a second, but those were things I'd collected over time. A little news story about a woman who almost loses her kid on a subway platform, a bar fight in the West Village, with a guy with a chainsaw. All these little bits and pieces that kind of went into my whatever springboard file or idea file, but none of them were big enough for a story. I mean, maybe if you sort of extrapolated everything out, you could get to a story, but they just were like interesting bits about the city. And then when I got to that 34 hours headline, that for whatever reason just triggered something in my head of, well, maybe this is it. Maybe if there's 34 hours without something as deadly as the worst moment possible, of people losing their lives constantly, and you're not fighting supervillains, let's put just Daredevil into sort of a city protector role, he could actually handle all these other things which are frivolous and important at the same time. So that's really where all of these other elements had a chance to kind of come together in a moment of like, oh yeah, that's the story. Then I still had to stitch it together, which was its own navigation.
I mean, it's a interesting story because I mean, not you couldn't do this with a lot of characters. Maybe Spider-Man, but it's like
it's like a superhero slice of life, day of my life, what I do at work kind of thing, and I kind of like it from that perspective.
Yeah, and just for listeners who aren't familiar with it, but you should become very familiar with it. You should go search it out. It is as Phil and Lilith set up, it is 34 hours in New York City where not a single murder is going to happen. And at the beginning of that, Daredevil realizes there's sort of like this lull in the and whatever the sensory impressions that he would normally be picking up about danger, murder, awfulness in that way. And then he sort of leaps into action, but the action becomes these vignettes. And maybe it's a couple of pages, or maybe it's a single page of everything from, some Wall Street, idiot trying to steal a cab from somebody, and he corrects that, to a massive bar fight that he breaks up, to some clueless idiots who are almost going to get killed in the middle of a city street, and he sort of interrupts their game of cross street tennis and pulls them out of that and rescues them, to a whole thing at the end where it's almost a cacophony of different things that are going to happen that's going to end up with a bunch of people dead, and he interrupts that in the middle of it. And so it is just that sort of slice of life, but amazingly it kind of wove together into something that felt very fluid, and certainly a lot of that credit goes to Ron Garney, who was the artist on that, and just did a miraculous job from start to finish to maintain consistency and to make those moments feel very alive.
And I don't know
Okay, I have to cut you off right here
Oh, go
because
ahead.
I just have to ask the most contentious point, Philip. Did he get any sleep? Because that's the one question everybody wants to know about this issue. If you don't want to answer if that was the point, okay. But if you can answer,
I don't.
answer.
I don't think he did, because that was sort of. I think I allude to that in a line, or sort of set that up. Like, basically, there's no time to rest. Like, I've got to use this time to sort of get in on all these other things. And whether it wasn't like, oh, there's no murders, I'm going to kick back and just take it easy on top of Water Tower. It's now there's time to kind of get into all these other things that normally might want to come through. And
Classic Matt, always
Yeah.
pushing himself, making himself the whipping boy. That's the
Exactly.
perspective that I took it from.
Exactly.
But a lot of people get confused about that. So I just wanted to clear that up in case anybody else had that.
I think that's it. So
So I always took it as that he picked like the same 34 hours every year and did this. So are you saying that he just said, okay, hey, it seems like there's a lull right now, so if I really push, I can have no deaths, in this 34 hours if I just do my thing for the next 34 hours.
yeah, he's not I never took it as he was holding back the murders by doing these other things. It was just that this happened to be like an opening. If you were, you said it was like the day job Lilith or something like that. It's, it's sort of like that thing at the office. If you work at a corporate office and suddenly, your boss is out for 2 days, or the high pressure project suddenly got put on hold, but you've got a bunch of mini sub projects which have their own importance. You can jump into them. So I don't think at the beginning he knew that the window was going to be exactly 34 hours. It was sort of like suddenly there was this lull. And in that lull, he could jump into all these other things. And then at the end, when suddenly there's that whatever, the slice of the knife, or, the gunshot or thing that sort of pulls him back into it and says, oh, okay, that clock has reset itself. Or, it's like being on a factory floor, right? We've now gone 721 days without an accident. We've now gone, 34 hours without a murder. What are you going to do in that time? And that was his chance to get involved and really just have varying degrees of character to some of those things in the city, right? And it was either stuff, again, I'd read in mostly Newsday, or things I'd witnessed just directly living in the city. I mean, the tennis game across the street, right? People playing across the entire street and knocking things back and forth was something I just came upon walking down, through the village one day. And so it just got filed away, and then suddenly it becomes an incident.
So a lot of these were stuff you either read or stuff you actually saw, like first.
Oh yeah, every single one of them was something that was either read or actually witnessed. I mean, I witnessed plenty of people stealing cabs from each other. That's kind of like a rite of passage at one point in New York. Maybe not so much nowadays with Uber and stuff, but that used to be the classic thing of somebody hails the cab meekly, and as it pulls up, some idiot runs up and steals it from them and just leaves them hanging there in the rain. So let's have Daredevil do just have a chance to kind of glide through, take care of it in 22 seconds, and off he goes.
I would love to see that foul, just like all these like pieces of paper, two idiots playing tennis in the street, or
I wish it definitely was a file. I mean, definitely at that point it was just more of a clip file and just things and pieces and notes and stuff. I've never, as much as I've always wanted to sort of be organized enough to have a really concise database of bits, it's never really materialized in exactly that way. I've managed to make my computer just as messy as my office, so there's no real organization, anything.
And he's relatable, folks.
Yeah.
Very honest about his creative process. I love it.
The most intimidating thing I think I ever saw as a writer was I was the managing editor on the 2 issues of Big Numbers that there ever were, the collaboration between Bill Sienkiewicz and Alan Moore. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it was supposed to be this massive 12-issue story of an English town. It was just kind of the machinations and the goings on between everybody as this corporate entity was kind of coming in, I think building like a shopping mall in it. And, it was multi-layered and it was extraordinary. But I had a chance to go meet Alan and go to his studio to talk about the story. And he had the whole thing mapped out on a wall, however big, maybe 12 feet across, 10 feet down.
He'd been up for a couple of days.
But it was like every issue was across the top, right? So 1 through 12, it was every character, and there was many, many characters. I mean, dozens of characters perhaps in this gigantic thing. And then in every intersecting box, there was exactly what was going to happen to them. So you could sort of go across the top and you can go to the character and know issue 8, this character is going to be here. And this is so well in advance of everything happening. It was just like, why do I bother? What's the point? But that was the way he worked, or at least on that project. I don't know if that was all together, but it was, it was extraordinary seeing ahead in that way.
I do that all on computer now.
Yeah.
Where's the fun in that, though? I just always want to see somebody with red string, couple of push pens, good old corkscrew board. That's right. How we do it.
Right. Who's not named Dexter?
Exactly.
But I love the story. It's great. I've loved it since they first came out. But you have to have the art too. And like you were talking about Ron Garney, I love Ron's art, but like even in this story, I don't know if it was like the inking or the coloring. I didn't even recognize it as Ron's art, and I was like, I was pleasantly surprised. I love his regular art anyway, but I'm like, this doesn't even remind me of like his regular art. So,
it was. We all evolve, and certainly if you see Ron's work now on Berserker or anything like that, it's. I think you can create a through line between it, but obviously it's much more accomplished and confident and easy now, but I think if you look back at it, you can sort of see the echoes of it. I think probably the cover is in the singular image just feels the most like Ron, and then as you're working through it, you can see moments, but I think there's he just obviously had a command of storytelling as well, which was so necessary to kind of make those moments work, especially since those moments were very often not outlandish, right? These weren't big superhero moments. These were a lot of small human moments where he had to set up things with the drama of a couple of quote unquote ordinary characters, and then Daredevil swoops in to intervene or make a moment, and then the whole choreography at the end, where there's just so many moments going on where these film students are getting things just go terribly wrong, and it just becomes almost kind of a game of bad stacked dominoes that are going to like knock into each other, and somebody's going to get shot, unless Daredevil shows up, and as he does.
But yeah,
oh, sorry, Phil.
I was going to say, I thought the art was great, and I think it was also great because it wasn't that like so different from like Lee's art or even
Mm-hmm.
Scott's art. So it kind of blended in perfectly, I think, with the whole run. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we really, when Scott had left the book later on, I mean, Ron was our first choice to try to get in on the book,
yeah,
just because he was Ron, and also this issue, particularly had sort of suggested, he had a great affinity, for the character.
oh, yeah.
But no matter what I did, I couldn't convince him because he's a stubborn character, but in the best of ways. In the best of ways.
Did he surprise you with any panels that you said, "Huh, I didn't think about it that way, but I like the way that you decided to go with that"?
Always.
Or was it just exactly
No.
how you envisioned?
No, because it was. Did we know? I'm trying to think if we knew that Ron was going to do this. When I wrote it, possibly, but certainly once I knew he was assigned to it, I didn't have any doubts about what would come out of it. And because this would have been done plot style, I would have written and when I wrote, I would try to detail out what was going to happen. In my head, I was almost seeing it panel by panel or shot by shot, but it wasn't written discreetly. Panel 1, panel 2, panel 3. I might suggest certain things there to kind of break up the action, but you never know what you're going to get in plot style, right? So that's the kind of beauty of it. The most things I would know was probably where I broke it down to, say, splash pages. Like the bar fight is essentially one shot, right? It's just Daredevil crashing through the window with this, brawler, and then all the surrounding story is these little captions that kind of paint the picture of what just happened. So, we knew that we wanted that flow to kind of break it up, so it wasn't just all little multi-panel things. That was a nice little bit of breathing space. So I knew it was going to be a splash, but I didn't know how Ron was going to do it, and certainly once you saw it, or once I saw it, that affects the way that you script it, because if everything's there, then you're like, okay, and you move on. You have nothing you need to explain, or you can write about other things, because he's obviously captured Daredevil's fierce intensity and the brawlers complete giving up or whatever, so you don't have to kind of get into that kind of thing. You can get into other stuff.
But yeah, like that page with him tackling the guy with the chainsaw through the window, and then even with the mugger tying him up with his own bat and literally throwing him through the doors of the police headquarters,
right?
Those just scream so Daredevil to me. It's just like, that's like classic Daredevil.
Yeah, there's yeah, I think and to me the end thing, the choreography at the end was just him seeing all the angles. I like that sense of his senses and him and his acrobatics and everything, knowing that's going to happen and this is going to happen, and I've got to get in between that, and just that always felt very, very Daredevil to me.
So there's at least 3 or 4 different things going on in that end scene. Were those all different things you had read or seen, or did you make some of that up? Or
well, most the core element of that. And so at the end, the big end scene is a bunch of film students are in Washington Square Park, and they're filming a stick up, a robbery of some kind in a film school student sort of way, just given the picture, not for you guys, but for other people. and then there's jugglers going on in the park, buskers, as there always were, and then there's an undercover vice cop who sees the film students and mistakes them for, mistakes it for like a real criminal incident. Mm-hmm. So the vice cop goes to get involved, draws down on the kids. The kids go to show them, it's film. These are props, and of course, then the cop doesn't know that, so there's going to be just a one-sided shootout, and everything's going to go horribly wrong. So I went to New York University Film School, which is right up the street from, or not right up the street. New York University had no campus really, and probably still doesn't. They just bought more real estate, but they the real estate they owned at that time revolved around Washington Square Park. So basically, we considered Washington Square Park and the Village kind of our campus. So we spent a lot of time making films in Washington Square Park, and then so that was one aspect of that, and the other aspect of that was literally in high school. I had made a film for history class, and we took a day off from school to go down to this local beach park to film this really awful scene with a prop BB gun, and it was supposed to be MacArthur's invasion of Normandy, and it was awful. It was bad stop motion, bad costumes, bad prop gun. And so we filmed the scene, and we were coming back across this little bridge from the beach area to the parking lot, and there was this crazy old woman, and who just was like eyeballing us, like, you kids shouldn't be here, why aren't you in school? And soon people will be making that same voice about me. But when I say something, get off my lawn. But we weren't paying her any mind, but clearly she thought we were enough trouble that she called the cops on us. So as we're packing the stuff back into the car, a single cop car pulls up, and the officer gets out, and he's basically don't move, show me your hands, because he could see the prop gun, right, that my friend, who would be the valedictorian of our class, had in his hand. Now, being the valedictorian is a very smart guy, and he puts two and two together, and he says to himself, oh, the fine officer thinks this is a real gun. Let me show him it is only a prop gun. So he begins to turn around, raising the gun to show the officer that this is a prop gun. At which point the officer draws down, on my friend, and says in no uncertain terms, basically, like, drop it. I mean, he's like one step away from shooting him, and if it was today, probably just this story would end in a much more horrific way. So then he throws us all on the car. He does the full frisk down. He says the magic words, officer needs assistance. So then 8 other cop cars show up. So the fortunately it all ended up being nothing, right, in the grand scheme of things. But that sense of dread and that momentary realization, that sort of seeing something really ridiculous transforming into something potentially really dangerous, right, that whole incident just stuck with me, and I said, that became like a real driver for that scene. So fortunately we didn't need Daredevil, and just to be clear, that old lady was like still there that whole time, cackling, like kind of like, you kids are getting what you deserve.
And that, kids, is why we don't skip school.
Exactly. That's why stay in school, Lilith. Always like, education matters.
I think we all had friends like that, and like when we were young, I those friends where you're just like, oh God, I'm gonna die because of this guy.
Yeah, and then he wasn't doing it. He just was putting two and two together, sort of saying like, oh, well, this is not. If there's a mistake here, let me correct it. It's not the moment for the correction, but a great eye opener. So
that's a great way to end the issue. Absolutely, like everything was just kind of like building, breathing.
Yeah, and then it became like a bigger moment, and again, not an over the top moment, not a Kingpin moment, not a Typhoid Mary moment, not something.
I like that he's very connected to his neighborhood and stuff like that. I love those little details about Daredevil. He just knows his city.
Well, I think that's something I wish I had ultimately done more of. I mean, that was certainly part of a lot of my initial proposal, right, for Daredevil, was his connection to the city. So I'm glad that came through, and I think it definitely works in that. I everything's hindsight's always that 20/20, but it would be great to find more of those moments throughout to connect with.
Well, yeah, I think it works with you because, like, I think I've told you before, like, I always felt like you wrote him as a man of the people, and like you really got in his head. So, I mean, if someone else had done this, I'd be like, man, this is like a change of pace. But with you, yeah, no, it didn't seem like that at all. It was
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I mean, it was it was an unusual beat, to sort of do it in that way, but it felt, it felt right. We would try to kind of recapture it a little bit just about a year later when there was a whole story where it was just Matt sort of, going about the city, not Daredevil, but like Matt kind of doing the same thing as him. I don't think that connected quite as well, in my mind, but it was trying to kind of do that same effect, and probably in the back of my head, if I had been smart enough to make plans in a really like organized way, that would have almost been maybe kind of a yearly issue, not around here's another 34 hours, but how do you how do you create that that those moments, right, that are sort of aside. There's a famous Batman story, and I'm blanking on the title, that Denny O'Neil wrote, I believe, since Denny O'Neil wrote so many of the formative stories. And is it just Crime Alley, or there's a and it's a very see if I can find it, but it's got that sort of moment, of might be there's no hope in Crime Alley. I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. But it has that that just you're in a kind of a bubble moment, type of story, and it's very much about what's happening, there, and then Batman's involvement, around it. I can't remember the details of it, but I remember it feeling, very striking, that you could do a story like that and not have it always have to be about supervillains, in its own way. And while that wasn't, I wasn't sitting down to do this story and say, I'm going to try and do a Denny O'Neil, Crime Alley story. I cannot imagine that wasn't in the back of my like influence, in head and such.
Well, I think with a lot of writers, I mean, yourself included, I mean, I think it just comes naturally for these street level heroes. Like, I mean, you could try to do it with the Superman, but it's like, well, why aren't you out like catching a falling plane?
It's why Superman doesn't take out the trash, as Charlie and I quote all the time. Can't be dependent on no superheroes.
Right.
But no, I do like that other story you were mentioning of yours, that Daredevil 316. We're gonna have to cover that one day, because I mean it's kind of like this, but it's like he's in the subway. What is it, for like a week, and it's like you never even see you never. One thing I think you like show, it's like here's one day, next day, next, and it's just like he doesn't even suit up. It's just Matt. Yeah,
right. It's just Matt. It's just kind of like Matt like going around. I don't know if he was down the subway for a week straight, but yeah, I think we were like playing it out as if all the vignettes were strung together, to feel like, but I don't think in my head, well, I'm going to send Matt down into the subway on Monday, and he's not going to let him come out again until Friday.
Well, no, I think he takes breaks, but it's like Monday, 9 a.m., and then Tuesday he might be out at like 5 in the afternoon, or
right. Yeah. It's just little things. And, and that I have to go back and reread that story for detail, but I know, that was very much the same in the way that, you live in New York, you work in New York, you spend enough time on the subway at that point, you observe all sorts of interesting characters and things and incidents and just moments, and how do you deal with them?
I believe you. I believe that, because my father drove a city bus for many years, and I heard stories. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I mean,
but I always thought they should do like some kind of mini collection and put this issue and that 316 together, and like some like 2-issue collection at least, or unless they threw some more of your issues in there, but at least those.
Or maybe I'm sure other writers have done street level, stories, probably day in the life stories type of things. I would imagine in the many years in between, I would think that would have come to somebody's imagination. That might be a kind of a fun collection to do in that way.
I got the perfect 4-issue collection. Marvel, yeah, this one 316 and that 2-issue Surgeon General.
I don't know if that's exactly street level. You know,
No, I mean, the villain has no powers. You know, it's kind
right.
of street level. You know,
A little bit, maybe urban street level. You know,
yeah.
urban myth street level. You know, I don't know about that. You know.
Daredevil urban battles.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. I should have just done a whole series of like urban myth stories. That would have been a kind of a
It's
probably
never too late, I'm sure.
Yeah, but that actually would have kind of probably given a little bit more credence to the Surgeon General if there had been a sort of an a mad uber villain who was sort of using all the urban myths as a way to kind of I don't know, whatever supervillains do, you know, to kind of trigger things. You could have had all those things coming to life in a strange way, and that would have been either an interesting or a way too inside baseball story. I don't know, one or the other.
I would have loved that urban legend. That I would have loved to have been there for, you know, when you turned in the script, you're like, wait a minute, Dan, you want him to fight alligators in the sewer? What?
How would that be anything different than what he normally does? You know, it's just could have been a bunch of, you know, Killer Croc jokes or something, you know, across the from our distinguished competition type of thing.
Well, towards the end of your run, you did do that. Wasn't there like a sewer story? That Deathlock stuff. Oh no, where's that Alan Smithy? I can't remember.
I think that was Greg Wright when he was when he did that fill-in set of books while we were working on Elektra. So I think that was the.
I thought you were on that too. I thought your name was on that too, or were you just like?
I think I was doing the backup like couple of page feature because we were leading into Elektra, and so I was doing. We had a couple of Elektra mini stories, and we had a couple of interviews with some of the creative team. Like I remember interviewing Hector Collazo and you know, talking about we were trying to drive up interest in the Elektra book, you know, through Daredevil. So we had that idea that would tease out things. So I was doing that, but I was focusing mostly on the mini series, you know, and then that's why I had asked Greg to come in and, you know, take on the main book for those 4 or 5 issues, because I knew that I could trust him to not
get too crazy and wild and you come back, what the heck?
Or, you
We're
know,
in space.
I didn't care. Yeah, I didn't care how crazy he got, so much as that he would maintain, you know, the right things and use the characters in the right way and use the costume in the right way and all that kind of stuff. So other people you know, you couldn't trust quite as much. So we had a lot of mutual respect for what each one was doing.
So what was I gonna say? Lilith, any questions while I collect myself?
No, not at all. Sorry to throw you on the spot there, Phil.
No.
No, it's just such a simple and straightforward story, and just, you know, we got the behind the scenes details that we were kind of like craving. So
yeah, I wouldn't, you know, I'll counter you there just a little bit, and I wouldn't consider it a really straightforward story, you know, at least from a yes, it's straightforward in that day in the life, you know, or way, but I think from a creative point of view, and I would even say from a reader's, you know, point of view, from a creator's point of view, you're taking a bunch of things that have no relationship to each other, right? And you're having to kind of weave them together, which isn't easy. And you know, and people could probably argue that, I don't know, I've actually I've heard lots of negative things about other issues, but but generally I think this one, when people read it, they tend to like it. But then you're also asking, I think, a lot of the readers, because you're probably picking up a Daredevil comic or any other comic like this, and you're asking, you know, you're expecting it's going to be a battle with X villain, or it's going to be a particular takedown of maybe some street level thing. So suddenly you're asking them to follow a much different story and also do it across all these disparate things. Like you got to keep up. You got to stay with me. You got to be interested enough and invested enough
Well,
to
it's
do
just
that.
so well written and very well paced that I didn't mind.
No, and I think that's a credit to people who really enjoy comics and really enjoy Daredevil,
Okay.
and then I'll give myself an unusual pat on the back, and certainly Ron, for then okay, now how does this weave together? How does this actually work? That it kind of carries through, because it would be really easy to do all these like disparate things, and it's like, what is that? That's like a dog's breakfast. It's like a combination of just too early for that. Sorry, but of little odds and ends. So I think, but I think from a creative point of view, and especially people who might be listening to this who are interested in comics, like creating comics, I would always say just keep collecting those bits and pieces, because you don't know where they're going to actually kind of come together in a story, and recognize that it's an idle Thursday when suddenly you realize, wait, all that becomes something.
So that's what I was going to say. I mean, this seems like a passion project, this issue. It's like, did you have this like in the works in your head for a while, or did you just like, when you got to this issue, you're just like, okay, what can I do now? Oh, I know.
It is, as I said, it was really that, it was that combination of collecting all those things just because, kids playing tennis across, whatever it was, South Broadway, it's like, oh, okay, we'll file that away. That was weird. Bar fight with a chainsaw, a busker in the park, with flaming, torches, just kind of that collection of those moments, file it away. And then it was the article that literally just became, that's really weird. That's unusual. That's like a once in a year incident. It's 34 hours this year. It's 22 hours next year. I don't know, whatever it is, if it even comes again, that we get that extension. So suddenly that was just that bolt of yeah, I want to do a story about what does Daredevil do in those 34 hours, and I've got all these little bits. So let's go. Let's put him to work.
No, I mean, like I said, again, I love the story. I'll give you the pat on the back. I mean, there's writers, I don't think they could do this as a backup story, and you made this the whole issue.
Thanks. No, I'm really proud. I've always been very proud of this story. I've always had a lot of passion for it, and the people have always thought it was kind of gamed in a way toward, because it's issue 304 and it's 34 hours.
Oh yeah,
and that's a complete coincidence. That was just I was not
serendipity.
It was exactly serendipity. I had it wasn't like, oh, it's issue 304, so we're going to make up a 34-hour nomenclature around it. It was literally, that was the article, and I was so ridiculously beholden to facts at that point that I couldn't. I probably wouldn't have. It can't be 32 hours. It can't be 36 hours. The article said it was 34 hours. I have to write a story about 34 hours. I was like way too tightly wound.
I just always read these through, and I just always thought, boy, this guy does his homework.
Well, yeah, that I did, but there was there was a movie that was on. It just came out on Netflix. It's called I think it's The Harder They Fall, and it's like a Western, and it's based on all these like real historical figures. And I remember I just read this interview with the director, and he was like saying,
it's not a biopic, just have fun, people.
Exactly. Like, he's saying, that they never met, or he wasn't like that, or he didn't look like Jonathan Majors or anything like that. He was just like, basically like, yeah, they were real historical figures, and I decided to make things up. And which is just a great attitude to take about like things. But at one point I was, again, so very tightly wound around things that I was like, no, it has to be this. But it ended up being very coincidental that the 34 and the 304 came together nicely.
Wait, so you're saying Abraham Lincoln never killed vampires?
No, he did.
No, he did.
Yeah,
I wholeheartedly
that's
believe
a different thing. Yeah,
oh, thank God.
That's on the History Channel, Phil. That's all.
Well, so are alien ancient history.
Yeah.
So take that with a grain of salt.
And Sharknado is about climate control, just climate crisis, rather. Just It's very subtle, but it's
Well,
Dang it, he wants us to give Ian Ziering a shekel.
Okay, here's a question for you. I mean, with the you have more experience now. You've probably read a lot more stories. Is there anything about this story you would change or do differently?
No, I really wouldn't. I mean, and you've heard me put on those 2020 hindsight glasses plenty of times and be very critical of I should have done this or I wish I hadn't done that in that way. And this one really felt it just, was exactly what I intended it to be, and how everything turned out, completely, dug into it. It wasn't, at no point did I sort of feel like, oh, he should have had a flyby with Kingpin or something like that. It really just felt like it was, no, this is the intention of this story, right? 34 hours, clock's ticking, get moving. And what are you gonna pack those hours with? And I think the underlying intention of the idea was we're seeing a fragment of what he's doing in those 34 hours, right? We're not seeing everything, that happens. If all this is happening, there's a dozen more, 2 dozen more, whatever. He's just kind of going and going and going and bouncing around Hell's Kitchen and other parts of the city based around what's happening. He's just pushing and pushing and pushing because there's that aspect of I can help people, right? I can do, more. So that would be, we could always do like the writer's recut and go back and double up on the incidents. What happened elsewhere in the city during those 34 hours,
I mean, again, you wrote a good story, and like Lil said, it's pretty straightforward. It's not like plot device,
right?
Right.
There's nobody in the shadows watching somebody in the shadows.
No. It's like, I will make those subway doors close too soon and trap that child. Somebody like there's no cackling thing, or there's no intrigue for now that I've distracted Daredevil for 34 hours. Next issue, my plot will come to the fore.
I mean, you laid out the whole thing on page 1. You're like, okay, Matt's gonna. It's a slow day or two. Matt's gonna take this 34 hours and try to keep people from dying. Boom.
Yeah, and it's years later, and it was like a perfect. It was a perfect Daredevil diorama like incident. I had been working at this place in at 11th Avenue and 46th Street, which is Hell's Kitchen. That whole area, is in there. And it was, I was coming out of the work late at night. And it was like 9 o'clock, and all of a sudden, there was this race of police cars, like heading toward Times Square, like ripping around the corner. They're racing down that direction. Lights are blaring, and the whole area was pretty skeevy at that time when I was there. So these cop cars race down. So I'm on 11th. By the time I get to 10th. Right, there's a car is wrecked, like not a cop car, but another car is wrecked. There's 2 people like down on the ground, badly injured or maybe dead. I don't know. What? It's terrible. By the time then you get to 9th, the cop cars are in a phalanx, or like in a circle, and they've got some criminal basically down the ground. They're handcuffing him. So it was almost like this walking diorama. You're kind of like going from 11th, across. And I remember thinking to myself, that felt very much like that slice of life, just these fragments of moments, of images that would kind of be captured in a story like this.
We call that a Tuesday afternoon in Florida.
Exactly. That's on the way to Chipotle. What are you talking about, Dan? You're like, that's the drive-through. It's like,
Lil sees that every week.
That's my cry for help, guys.
So probably like a big thing you'd recommend the writers it's just like get as many life experiences, or like just observe as much as you can, because you never know when you can plug something into a story.
observing is everything. And a good friend of mine, this guy Mark Belushi, and I did a podcast for just under 2 years, or just over 2 years, and it was like a 10-minute podcast, and it was all about writing. It was meant to be like hyper quick, and we'd give like little tips and little things that we were kind of inspired by. And one of the ones that we kept coming back to in one form or another, because obviously we were bereft of ideas and had to repeat ourselves, but there is that sense of just capturing the things you see. I mean, one of my favorite things, was just these like little like field notebooks, like, I mean, these are literally called field notes, but just like carrying around like this little like notebook with you, like at all times, like something you can just crush up and stick in your pocket and have with you no matter what. To me, it's even better than, okay, I can take notes on my phone, but this just becomes the thing that you sort of just jot stuff down, and you see something, and a guy who talks while bouncing a feather on his hat, on his hat all the time, or the little bits of dialogue you overhear, or an argument between people, and you're becoming this weird sort of voyeur, I guess, but at the same time you're capturing these things, and you don't know where they're going to add up, right? They don't suddenly become a story on their own, but maybe later on they become the story behind the story. You're looking for why is this woman so troubled, right? Why is she so wrapped up in her own emotions? Maybe she had that argument that you observed before. So I think it's the most important thing is to have that, and not you at least for me, oh, I'll remember that later. Forget it. It's just not gonna. It's gonna happen. It's like when you wake up for the dream and you say, I've got the cure to world whatever hunger, and I know how to fix fusion energy, and and you try to stumble over to the bedside notebook, or and you can't even read your handwriting. So I think that collecting of moments is so key, and making it convenient for you. So I just I carry like one of these and a little mini miniaturized pen, like kind of just tucked inside it, pretty much everywhere. And when I'm driving, I've literally seen things, and if my wife is with me, I've said, write this down right now, write down graveyard for hire, because I just suddenly I saw something, and then if I don't remember that line, I won't remember what all the connective pieces are. But if I have that one line, then I'll remember, oh, I'm thinking about this and this and this and this and this.
Not to get too far down the rabbit hole, but it's like how often do you see something and you're like, oh, I got to write that down? Is it every day? Is it just?
I mean, I would say every day that I'm out. If there's days that I'm just working from from home, not as much, because probably I'm focused on a particular project or assignment, and that's really kind of occupying my time. But I would say if I'm out and about, it's either I've seen something like that, or there's something else I've been thinking about suddenly hits me, in the whole range of my mind has worked out this stuff. And I think that's been proven time and again. Like, percolate on something, don't drill into it beyond a certain point. You're not going to solve it. Go for a walk, right? Go for a walk, and the physical motion, the air, whatever else it is, will fill in the gaps. I mean, there was a scene I was writing for something not too long ago that was I couldn't get past the dialogue. I had the incidents. All right, this happens, and this is a comic story sort of thing, and I knew what the visuals were going to be. I knew where the panel layout was going to be, but I knew what I sort of wanted them to say, but I just couldn't get it. And then I was taking a walk, at that beach park where I almost got shot. And, and so it keeps coming back around. You can see the levels. But it was just suddenly the dialogue just started to come in my head, right? It was just this I could almost hear it. I could hear it. And so I had the pad and I just wrote down the dialogue sort of free form. I wasn't thinking about it, but just so you have to have that ability to kind of capture that stuff, with you. So I would say at least once a day when I'm out and about.
Do you ever ask like any other like anyone an opinion on something, like either another writer or even your wife or anything, or are you just like, no one can read this until I'm done with it? At least with the first draft.
Yeah, when it's in a place to share, I will do that. With certain people that I trust and fear. So
that's mine over there.
I'll go back to my friend Greg Wright and this project that I was talking about a moment ago. Where I was trying to work through the dialogue and stuff has been something I was working on for a while, and I was scared to send it to him because I knew that he would be incisive and also honest about it, right? So if it sucked, that was going to be pretty damning in that way. He was not going to, he wasn't going to worry about the fact we've been friends for 30, 40 years. He was just going to tear it apart, which I did not want, right? I'd worked on it a long time. It's like, oh my God. But he, he did. He tore it apart, but there was enough valid things in there that it was the right feedback. I think it's important that you get feedback, Phil, to get back around. But you have to get it from a small trusted circle of people who aren't going to, just pat you on the back. Oh, nice job, Dan. Nice job, Lilith. Just it's so good that you know how to put words together. I don't need that, right? You don't need that, but you need somebody who's going to see what you're trying to do, and then be honest, giving you that feedback, and then hopefully also give you some ideas on solutions, which don't mean they're the solutions you choose, but they're ways forward, so you can kind of connect that up.
Sorry about all the writing questions. I'm just intrigued.
No,
behind the scenes. Yeah.
I think that's a trusted circle of people is important to have, and ultimately, right, you're hopefully going to get something in front of an editor anyway, and you're going to be more, you're going to get some more good feedback there. And you guys have probably realized in talking to me over these Chichester chats, I'm relatively self-critical to start with. Right. I don't let a lot of stuff go, and I will wrestle over lines and scenes and say that doesn't fucking work. And, that's, and sometimes it doesn't. And you have to be, you in your first draft, you may power through. I got a great writing tip from David Quinn. Who worked on, created Faust, and then worked on a lot of Doctor Strange and other things. And he gave me one of the best writing tips I've gotten in recent times, which he said, if you're writing something and you hit a wall, right, it's a line or a character or a scene, and you just write like in brackets, funny line goes here. or evil villain appears here, or a scene that gets from this point to that point goes here. You don't like stop and wrestle over that right line or wrestle over that right character description or whatever. Just bracket it out and just keep moving. And then when you come back later, whether you want to come back, I thought it was brilliant. It was just such a kind of a refreshing thing of like, damn, that line, I got to work on it. No, line where he insults the villain goes here, and then just move on. And that, again, I think plants the seed that then when you're walking around, you're carrying around your little notebook, you're going to, suddenly that line might come to you, and because you put it out there.
And in that case too, you probably you write the character more then. So when you come back, you're like, okay, I know this character a little better. I know what he or she would say in this situation.
Yeah. Or you just keep going down the line, and suddenly you're writing some other lines that are coming to you, and maybe you're going to pick them up and pull them back into that scene. I mean, this is, my newsletter, that you guys are always nice enough to plug. I called it Into the Story Maze, and the things I sort of, play around with there is around that whole, that's just the way I work. I think actually it's the way a lot of people work, probably, if they looked at it, but that sort of meandering, wandering around, and I'm going down this pathway and I don't have this. Oh, I found that line, but that line doesn't belong there. I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to bring it back over here around this corner. It's ultimately worked out for me. So I've tried to embrace it now more than I need a system. I need an official system that actually, like, you know, works things out in these very diagrammatic forms. I would love to do that, but I've tried it so many times that
it's not for everybody.
I've just come to realize it's not for everybody. Some people are deep into that, and it just has never worked for me.
I just have one more question. I think we could probably wrap it up. Since like you've done work as an editor, do you think that has helped you or hurt you? Do you have like the good devil, like the bad devil and the good angel on one shoulder? Editor Dan going, now you know.
Absolutely. No, the being an editor has helped me throughout comics, helping other people, helping me as a writer, and it's helped me in other career angles. I mean, it was a formative, sort of thing to think about, in that way. And for a long time, I would say, oh, I felt I was a better editor than I was a writer. And I still think I'm a pretty good editor if I was to get back to that. But at this point, I'll agree that I'm a pretty good writer too. But
we've had the breakthrough moment, guys.
The breakthrough moment. Put it out there. But I think because you're reading so many different things, and from different styles, right, and different people. I mean, from when I worked at Epic as an editor, right, it was everything from Mark Evanier and Sergio Aragonis on Gru, which was a totally complete book. My editor work there was basically great. Thanks, guys. Like, there was nothing to do. What are you going to do? Criticize Sergio? And to Pat Mills, to Mark DeMatteis, Keith Giffen, different voices and different ways of sort of telling stories with words, with pictures, and then just helping them kind of get to certain areas of clarity or intention. So you learn a lot by doing that. At least I did.
Is that a little intimidating, like trying to give like notes to people? You're like, oh my god, I'm giving notes to this person,
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes they, especially at Epic, they didn't want to take them, right? Because I mean, I was trying to help, but it was most of those books were creator owned. So trying to give feedback and say, I'm not going to mention any names, but X, this isn't clear. Well, it's my book, and that's the way I want to say it. Okay, but I'm assuming you're writing the book because you want people to understand what you're trying to get at. And I'm just trying to tell you it doesn't.
My audience will just know.
So there was some of that. And sometimes, you'd pull the Archie Goodwin string or lever and say, well, I talked to Archie, and Archie
nice.
And I would have probably checked with Archie and not just used that. But yeah, I think there was a certain level of intimidation. But then I think that's what I was saying about the formative aspect that was unplanned. It raises your level of confidence because you then start to realize everybody's pretty much the same. Everybody's got their high skills and their foibles. And if you can play at a level where Clive Barker listens to my feedback and accepts it, then I'm feeling pretty good about myself, right? Or is interested in my opinion on where we should go with these type of things. So definitely that helped me altogether as an editor, and then later as a writer, and I think just as a professional overall. But so it's always the editor to me is always one may have wings and one may have horns, Lilith, on the shoulders, but they're important. Some people will diss editors, and there are certainly dissable editors. But I think a good editor is an incredibly important part to your creative process. It's that trusted circle, Phil.
I mean, if nothing else, I think it's now it's like no editor's going to let this through, or it's too much bloodshed in this comic. No.
There's that. Yeah, there's the Ralph. Not the right book, Dan. But it's more than just rejecting things. It's helping you. It's helping you explore ideas. It's helping you. Greg Wright. In that story I was talking about a little while ago, I mean, for all aspects, played a bit of an editor when I shared that with him. And he said, okay, you're trying to get to this, but that's not clear, right? You think it's clear? It's not clear. I know where you want to go because you told me, and I can figure out like that, but there's a gap here. You want to act like the readers are going to mystically do this, or do you want to fill this in with this stuff, And so it's like, okay, what do I do? Do I play the my readers will get it? I don't have any readers right now. I mean, so it's important to get to that point of, all right, you understand what I'm doing. You're missing something. You're helping me get to a better place, which does not deaden my story or dumb it down. It just helps. It helps make it better.
All right, I keep sorry to keep dragging this out, but I mean, so is it a little easier in a monthly comic to get the ideas across, because it's like, okay, I mean, at this point you've been writing Daredevil for at least a year, so it's like, people are familiar with my work, and rather than like, say you put out like a novel and it's like, okay, it's like a one thing, so people may not be as familiar with my writing, so I kind of have to get more, I don't know how to say it, more into the process, more details, more.
There's well, when you have your favorite writers, you definitely do kind of develop that language between the writer and the reader. That you can take those little liberties of shortcuts, kind of, whether it's visually or the way you say or do a thing. I think is maybe what you're getting at.
Is that the question, Phil? Like, do you start to kind of develop a language for a book or a character? And
yeah. Like when you do something long term, like a monthly comic. Yeah, is it like like your own language or?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think my language certainly became about the senses and playing things out in that way.
We did bring that up in the review, actually.
Yeah, and that's a lot of. I think that became my happy place, in a way. That was something I always wanted to explore with Daredevil, and that was maybe something people became familiar with as it went through, which was not something that I would have been as mindful of from the first issue, where I was kind of picking things up in midstream and then aiming for 300 and that thing. And I think you do get more familiar with that. And then once you get, a partner on comics is incredibly important from a writer point of view. Who are you working with? Who's the artist? Who's the one who's bringing that forward? Because then that affects the feeling and the flow that you're into, and hopefully you're having a good dialogue there, and then that starts to create some of that shorthand and some of that language. But I don't think you ever want to get just comfortable with it. It just doesn't become, oh, here's my language crutch, or here's my my scene, my easy scene tool that I pull off the shelf and plug this in here, because that sort of happens. Because then you start to get, I think your muscles start to get weak. You always want to sort of challenge yourself and write yourself into a corner of something, right? Make your characters miserable, and
well, boy, do we do that with Daredevil.
Exactly. That's not a tough one, and then help them find, and then let them find their way out of it, right? Because then that's the best shorthand, right? Frankly, is when the characters take over and start to kind of run with themselves, and then you suddenly realize they're telling me the story versus me forcing them into the situation.
All right, should we finally let this man go?
Yes, let him have his Saturday, sir.
I think it's been 10 minutes of one more
thing.
What
are you gonna do? Are you writing a comic book behind my back, Philip?
No. All right, before we get to the plugs, next time let's give
oh yeah, what's up for next time? What do you guys got planned?
I believe it's a 2-issue fill-in you did, Wolverine 58 and 59.
With Back to Terror? Okay.
Yes,
okay.
with Terror, yes.
Okay.
So Wolverine,
very
Terror.
cool. Okay.
I think one of your favorites, Jubilee, is in there, Lilith.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a fun story. That's a great one. Okay, looking forward to that.
All right, so thank you, sir, once again. Let everyone know where can they find you, the newsletter, everything.
thank you for the plug time. Folks who've been interested in this conversation and are writing asides and other stuff, please check out the newsletter is called Into the Story Maze, and you can find it at storymaze.substack.com.
All right. And you know us kids, everything, social media, the Patreon, which you're on right now, the merchandise, all of it's at Linktree, linktr.ee/capesandlunatics. And again, any questions for Mr. Chichester, send them capesandlunatics@gmail.com. Right down there.
Excellent. All right, guys, I'm going to head out, and you guys have a great Saturday as well.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.
Always a pleasure.
All right, see you guys soon. Bye.
See you.
Bye.